is happening to her? It is a curse. Everyone stand back.
They found her at dawn, standing barefoot at the edge of the village square in Enugu. Her expensive lace wrapper soaked in red clay, her gold jewelry scattered at her feet like worthless stones. She was laughing. Not the laughter of joy, but something else. Something that made grown men step back and mothers pull their children close. The woman who had everything just 3 months ago was now telling anyone who would listen about voices in her husband's mansion, about shadows that moved when no one walked, about gold that burned her skin. Her name was Chidinma. And this is the story of how a woman who married for wealth discovered that some prices are too terrible to pay. Before we continue deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What happened in that mansion during those 3 months? Why would a woman who had clawed her way out of poverty, who had finally secured the life she always dreamed of, walk away from it all? And more importantly, what was it about her husband's wealth that no one in the village dared to question? The answers lie in a story that began not with love, but with calculation. A story that proves some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. This is not just a tale about greed. It's about the weight of choices, the price of ambition, and the ancient powers that some people are foolish enough to disturb. Chidinma grew up in Nui, in a compound where the roof leaked when it rained, and her mother sold acro by the roadside just to pay school fees. She was beautiful. Everyone agreed on that. Tall, with skin the color of fresh honey and eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they saw. But beauty without money in Nigeria is like a car without fuel. It might turn heads, but it won't take you anywhere. Her father died when she was 12, leaving behind nothing but debts and a warning her mother repeated every night like a prayer. A woman who marries a poor man will know suffering. Choose wisely. Chidinma heard that warning until it became the rhythm of her heartbeat. In secondary school, while other girls giggled about love and romance, Chidinma studied the wives of wealthy men. She watched how they walked, how they talked, how they commanded respect without raising their voices. She practiced their mannerisms in front of broken mirrors, perfected their accent, learned to smile in a way that promised everything while revealing nothing. By the time she turned 25, Chidinma had rejected 7 marriage proposals. Good men. Hardworking men. Men who loved her genuinely. Love doesn't pay school fees, she told her best friend Ngozi, who had married for love and now lived in a one-room apartment with 3 children. Love doesn't fix leaking roofs or put food on the table. I want more than survival. I want to live. Then she met Chief Emeka Okafor at a wedding in Lagos. He was 53, twice her age, with a belly that spoke of excess and eyes that revealed nothing. He owned businesses nobody could quite explain, 3 houses in Enugu, 2 in Abuja, and 1 in London. He drove cars that cost more than most people earned in 10 years. And most importantly, he was widowed. His first wife had died 2 years earlier under circumstances people whispered about, but never discussed openly. Chidinma saw an opportunity. Chief Okafor saw a prize. Within 3 months, they were engaged. Ngozi came to visit her the night before the traditional marriage, worry written all over her face. They sat in Chidinma's room, surrounded by boxes of expensive lace and coral beads that Chief Okafor had sent. "Didi, people are talking," Ngozi said quietly, using Chidinma's nickname. "They say his money is not clean. They say his first wife suffered before she died. They say things happen in that house." Chidinma was painting her nails a deep red, barely looking up. "People always talk, Ngozi. When you're poor, they pity you. When you're about to be rich, they try to pull you down. I've made my choice. But what if they're right? What if there's something wrong about his wealth?" Chidinma finally looked at her friend, her expression hard. "Every wealthy man in this country has secrets, Ngozi. At least Chief Okafor's secrets come with a mansion, drivers, and a bank account that doesn't make me anxious. I'm tired of being poor. I'm tired of watching my mother suffer. This is my chance, and I'm taking it." Ngozi left that night with a heavy heart, and Chidinma continued her preparations. She pushed away the small voice in her head that sounded like her father, warning about shortcuts and consequences. She ignored the dreams where she stood in a dark room, reaching for gold coins that turned to dust in her hands. The traditional marriage was lavish. The white wedding was even more spectacular. Chidinma became Mrs. Okafor, and for the first few weeks, it felt like she had finally won. The mansion in Enugu was enormous, with marble floors, chandeliers, and more rooms than she could count. She had house helps, a driver, accounts with her name that made her dizzy when she checked the balance. She sent money to her mother, who cried with relief and gratitude. She posted pictures on social media that made old classmates seethe with envy. She had everything she wanted. Almost everything. The first strange thing happened 3 weeks into the marriage. Chidinma woke up at 3 a.m. to find Chief Okafor's side of the bed empty. She heard voices coming from somewhere in the house, low and rhythmic like a chant. She wrapped her robe around herself and followed the sound through the dark corridors. The voices led her to a door at the end of the east wing, a door she'd never noticed before, somehow hidden in plain sight. The voices stopped the moment she touched the handle. When Chief Okafor appeared behind her minutes later, his face was calm, but his eyes held a warning. That room is private, Chidinma. You're never to go near it. Do you understand? Never. She nodded, her mouth too dry to speak, and he led her back to their bedroom without another word. She tried to forget, tried to convince herself it was nothing. But 2 nights later, she woke again to silence and found the same thing. Her husband gone, and that door at the end of the hall seeming to pulse with something she couldn't name. This time, she didn't approach it. This time, she noticed something else. There was a smell in the house at night, faint but unmistakable, like burning herbs and something metallic, something that reminded her of blood. During the day, everything seemed normal. Chief Okafor was kind to her, generous, attentive in his own distant way. He bought her gifts, took her to expensive restaurants, introduced her to influential people. But at night, the house changed. She started hearing footsteps in empty hallways. Doors that she had closed would be open in the morning. And her sleep became plagued with nightmares where a woman who looked like her stood in a room filled with gold, screaming silently as shadows wrapped around her throat. Then came the morning she found the photographs. She was looking for her phone charger in Chief Okafor's study when she knocked over a book on his desk. Behind was a small wooden box she'd never seen before. Inside were photographs. His first wife, beautiful and smiling in the early pictures, but changing gradually in the later ones. In the last photograph, the woman looked skeletal, her eyes hollow with a kind of terror that made Chidinma's hands shake. Underneath the photos was a single piece of paper with writing in a language Chidinma didn't recognize and a red stamp that looked like it had been made with blood. She heard Chief Okafor's car pull into the compound and quickly put everything back, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. That evening, she called Ngozi, whispering into her phone in the bathroom with the shower running. Something is wrong here, Ngozi. I don't know what, but something is very wrong. His first wife, I saw her pictures. She looked terrified. And there's this room, and sounds at night, and come home, Didi. Just leave. Whatever money you've sent your mother, it's not worth your life. I can't just leave. I'm married. I signed papers. My family has received bride price. And maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe there's an explanation. But there wasn't. That night, Chidinma pretended to sleep and watched through barely open eyes as Chief Okafor rose at 2 a.m. and left the bedroom. She waited 10 minutes, then followed him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would wake the entire house. This time, the door at the end of the hall was slightly open and light flickered from inside. Chidinma crept closer, pressing herself against the wall, and looked inside. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. The room was lined with shelves holding jars filled with things she couldn't identify in the dim candlelight. In the center was a shrine, covered in red and white cloth, with a large statue of something that was neither quite human nor quite animal. And kneeling before it was Chief Okafor, speaking in that same rhythmic chant she'd heard before, holding something in his hands. Gold coins. Stacks of them. As she watched, frozen in horror, he placed them on the shrine, and they seemed to disappear into the cloth, dissolving like sugar in water. Then he said something that made Chidinma's knees weak. Take what is yours. As you have given, so you shall continue to receive. The contract continues. The sacrifice continues. Sacrifice. The word echoed in Chidinma's mind as she backed away from the door, her hand over her mouth to stop from screaming. She made it back to the bedroom just before Chief Okafor returned, and lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, understanding finally what she had walked into. Her husband's wealth wasn't earned through business alone. It was sustained by something else. Something that demanded payment. Something that had taken his first wife. And now, she realized with growing horror, she was part of the contract too. The next morning, Chidinma tried to act normal, but everything felt different. The mansion she had loved now felt like a prison. The gold jewelry her husband had given her burned against her skin. The food tasted like ash in her mouth. She needed answers, but who could she ask? Who would believe her? She remembered her mother's friend, Mama Nkechi, who was known in Nui for her spiritual knowledge. When Chief Okafor left for a business meeting, Chidinma took one of the cars and drove 2 hours to her hometown, telling the driver she was visiting her mother. Mama Nkechi lived in a small house at the edge of the village, surrounded by herbs and a garden that seemed to grow wild on purpose. The old woman took one look at Chidinma and nodded slowly. "You have the smell of shrine on you, child. Sit down. Tell me everything." Chidinma told her everything. The room, the shrine, the chanting, the gold disappearing, the photographs of the first wife, and the dreams that were becoming more vivid and more terrifying each night. Mama Nkechi listened without interruption, her face growing more serious with each detail. When Chidinma finished, the old woman was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed deeply. "Your husband has made a covenant, child. The kind that some men make when they're desperate for wealth and power. He has offered the shrine something in exchange for his prosperity. Do you know what happens to such covenants? They must be fed constantly. The wealth continues, but only if the sacrifice continues." Chidinma felt cold despite the warm afternoon. What kind of sacrifice? Different shrines demand different things. Some want only offerings of animals and money. Others want more, much more. They want life force. They want souls. Your husband's first wife, did she waste away slowly? Did she become thin, tired, unable to explain her weakness? Chidinma nodded, remembering the photographs, the progression from vibrant woman to hollow shell. She was the first payment, child. When a man makes this kind of covenant and takes a wife afterward, the wife becomes part of the agreement, whether she knows it or not. The shrine feeds on her life force to maintain his wealth. Slowly, gradually, until there's nothing left. The room seemed to spin around Chidinma. She thought of all the times she'd felt inexplicably tired despite doing nothing. The way her reflection in the mirror sometimes seemed stranger, as if she was looking at someone else. The gold that had felt so wonderful at first, but now felt heavy, suffocating. What can I do? How do I break free? Mama Nkechi stood and began gathering items from her shelves. Herbs, cowries, small bottles of liquids that caught the light strangely. Breaking free is not simple. You are bound by marriage, by the bride price, by the traditional rites. But more than that, you are bound by the covenant that was made before you entered that house. To break completely free, the covenant itself must be broken. And that means your husband must choose to release you. Or, she paused, looking at Chidinma with ancient, knowing eyes. Or the shrine must be destroyed. But destroying such a shrine is dangerous, child. Very dangerous. It will demand retribution. It will not let go of what it considers its property without a fight. Chidinma felt tears running down her face, tears of rage and fear and regret. I was so foolish. I only wanted to escape poverty. I wanted security. I wanted my mother to stop suffering. Mama Nkechi touched her shoulder gently. We all make choices, child. Some for love, some for security, some for survival. You are not the first woman to marry for wealth, and you won't be the last. But you have discovered the truth early. Some women spend years, decades, slowly fading away before they understand what's happening to them. You still have time. You still have strength. The question is, what will you do with it? The old woman gave Chidinma a small pouch of protective herbs and specific instructions. With this always, it will slow the drain on your life force, but it won't stop it completely. You must make a choice, and make it soon. Will you stay and slowly fade like the first wife? Will you run and live with the knowledge that the covenant may still follow you? Or will you find the courage to end it, once and for all? Chidinma drove back to Enugu with Mama Nkechi's words echoing in her mind. When she arrived at the mansion, Chief Okafor was already home, standing in the foyer with a strange expression on his face. Where did you go today, Chidinma? His voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. To see my mother. She hasn't been feeling well. He studied her for a long moment, and she had the frightening sensation that he could see right through her, could see every thought, every plan, every grain of fear in her heart. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I see. Well, she must be feeling better now that you visited. Come, dinner is ready. That night, Chidinma couldn't eat. The food looked fine, smelled fine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that consuming anything in this house was feeding the covenant. She pushed the food around her plate, while Chief Okafor watched her with that same unsettling smile. After dinner, As they walked to their bedroom, he spoke again, his voice casual. My first wife used to act strangely too, toward the end. Becoming paranoid, asking questions, going to see spiritual people behind my back. It made things difficult for everyone. Chidinma's blood turned cold. He knew. Of course he knew. Perhaps he had always known, with every wife, every woman who entered this house and eventually understood the trap they were in. I'm just tired, she whispered. Adjusting to married life can be overwhelming. Indeed, he agreed, opening the bedroom door. But you chose this life, Chidinma. You chose it because you wanted wealth, wanted security, wanted to escape poverty. Those were your exact words, weren't they? I want more than survival. I want to live. Well, you're living now. You should be grateful. That night, Chidinma didn't sleep at all. She lay in the darkness, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down on her like a physical force, knowing that she had to make a decision that would determine not just her future, but perhaps her very survival. The turning point came exactly 3 months after her wedding, on a night when Chief Okafor had to travel to Abuja for business. Before he left, he gave her explicit instructions. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Stay in the house. Don't go anywhere. Don't let anyone in, especially anyone claiming to have spiritual knowledge or advice for you. Do you understand, Chidinma? She nodded obediently, but her mind was already racing. This might be her only chance to enter that room when he wasn't there, to understand fully what she was dealing with. That night, after the house staff had retired to their quarters, Chidinma waited until midnight. She tied Mama Nkechi's protective pouch around her waist, said a prayer her mother had taught her as a child, and walked through the dark mansion to that door at the end of the east wing. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the handle, but she forced herself forward. The room was worse than she had imagined. The shelves weren't just holding jars. They held bones. Small bones, bird skulls, things preserved in liquids that glowed faintly in the darkness. The shrine in the center dominated the room, draped in red and white cloth, stained with substances Chidinma didn't want to identify. And on the walls were photographs. Dozens of them. Not just of Chief Okafor's first wife, but of other women too. Women from different eras, different decades, going back further than should be possible. All beautiful, all young when their pictures were first taken. All progressively more skeletal, more hollow-eyed in subsequent photos. And then, in the most recent section, she saw them. Her own wedding photos already hung on the wall, and next to them, blank spaces waiting to be filled, waiting to document her own decline. But it was what she found in the drawer beneath the shrine that broke something inside her. A ledger. A record book written in Chief Okafor's handwriting, documenting every payment made to the shrine. Dates. Amounts of money received. And next to each entry, in a separate column, notes about his wives. First wife, patience. Initial sacrifice, 3 years duration, successful completion. Wealth increased by 300%. Second wife, Neka. Initial sacrifice, 5 years duration. Complications arose. Contract terminated early. Wealth maintained. There were 5 wives listed. 5 women who had entered this house, been consumed by the covenant, and disappeared from the world with no one questioning their fates. And at the bottom, the most recent entry, 6th wife, Chidinma. Initial sacrifice accepted, 3-year duration projected. Youth and vitality optimal. Contract in progress. Chidinma's vision blurred with tears and rage. She had been a transaction, a literal sacrifice to fuel a man's greed. Every smile, every gift, every moment of supposed affection had been part of a calculated contract with something dark and ancient. She was about to close the ledger when she noticed one more thing. A note in the margin, written in a different hand, spidery and strange. The covenant can be broken by the willing sacrifice of the one who made it, or by destroying the shrine at the hour of its feeding with pure intent. But beware, the price of breaking is steep. The shrine will take what it's owed, one way or another. Chidinma stood there in that room of horrors, understanding finally the full scope of her situation. She could run, and maybe survive for a while, but the covenant would follow her. She could stay and die slowly like the 5 before her. Or she could do what none of the others had been brave or desperate enough to attempt. She could destroy the shrine. But the cost would be terrible. The shrine would demand payment for being broken, and that payment would likely be her husband's life. Or hers. Or both. She thought about Chief Okafor, about the man she had married, knowing she didn't love him, but wanting his wealth. Was his life worth saving? Did he deserve mercy? But then she thought about the 5 women before her, about their faces in those photographs, about their families who probably never knew the truth about what happened to them. She thought about her own mother, about Ngozi, about every woman who had ever been told that poverty was worse than death, who had been taught to value security over everything else. And she made her choice. It took her the rest of the night to prepare. She used every bit of knowledge Mama Nkechi had given her, plus her own intuition, plus something deeper, something that felt like the anger and desperation of 5 dead women guiding her hands. She gathered materials from around the house: salt, the herbs Mama Nkechi had given her, palm oil, and something she found in the garden that glowed faintly in the darkness, growing near what might have been grave markers. At 3 a.m., the hour when the shrine was most active according to the ledger, she returned to the room. She could feel it aware of her, hostile, recognizing that she was not there to worship or feed it. She arranged the materials in a circle around the shrine, speaking words Mama Nkechi had taught her, words that felt ancient on her tongue. The room began to grow cold, then hot, then cold again. The jars on the shelves started to rattle. The photographs on the walls began to fall, one by one. Faces of dead women watching her with expressions that might have been hope or warning. She took a match and lit the circle, and the flames that rose up were not natural flames. They were gold and silver and black, and they consumed the shrine with a hunger that matched the shrine's own appetite. As the shrine burned, Chidinma felt something tear inside her, like a cord being severed. She gasped and fell to her knees, feeling her life force suddenly her own again, no longer being slowly drained away. But she also felt something else, the covenant screaming in rage, reaching out for retribution, demanding payment for being broken. The mansion shook, windows cracked, and somewhere in Abuja, at that exact moment, Chief Emeka Okafor collapsed in his hotel room, clutching his chest, as everything the shrine had given him for 4 decades began to be taken back. Chidinma woke up in a hospital in Enugu 2 days later, with Ngozi holding her hand and tears streaming down her face. "You've been unconscious for 2 days, Didi. They found you in the mansion, the east wing completely destroyed by fire. You're lucky to be alive. They said it's a miracle you survived." "Chief Okafor?" Chidinma's voice was hoarse, though she already knew the answer. Ngozi's face confirmed it. "He died, Didi. Heart attack in Abuja, the same night as the fire. They're saying it's a tragedy, that stress from his business dealings finally caught up with him. The funeral is next week." Chidinma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what she had done, what she had survived. She had killed her husband, in a way, though no court would ever prosecute her for it. She had broken a covenant that had consumed 6 women before almost claiming her too. But she was alive. Her mother came to visit her in the hospital, crying and grateful, not understanding the full story, never needing to. Mama Nkechi came too, looked at Chidinma with knowing eyes, and nodded once. "You chose well, child. Not the easiest path, but the one that broke the cycle. The shrine is destroyed. The covenant is broken. The wealth is gone too. All of it. You'll inherit nothing from your husband except your freedom." And she was right. When the lawyers came to read Chief Okafor's will, they discovered that his accounts were empty. His properties had liens and debts no one knew about. His business empire had been built on paper and promises and something darker that evaporated the moment he died. Everything he owned had to be sold to pay his debts. Chidinma left the mansion with nothing but the clothes on her back and the knowledge that she had survived. She moved back to Nui, back to her mother's house with the leaking roof, back to the poverty she had tried so desperately to escape. But something was different now. She was different. 6 months after the events at the mansion, Chidinma started her own small business selling clothes in the market. It was hard work, honest work, the kind of work that made her hands rough and her back ache. But every naira she earned was hers, untainted by dark covenants or blood sacrifices. She thought often about the 5 women whose photographs she had seen, about their faces and their fates. She carried their memory like a responsibility, a reminder of the price that some people pay for other people's wealth. Ngozi visited her one afternoon, bringing pepper soup and gossip from the village. As they sat together in the small shop, Ngozi asked the question she'd been holding back for months. "Do you regret it, Didi? If you could go back, knowing what you know now, would you still marry him?" Chidinma looked out at the busy market, at women selling their goods, at children running between stalls, at the messy, difficult, beautiful reality of everyday life. "I regret that I valued wealth over wisdom. I regret that I thought security from a rich man was better than security I built for myself. I regret that I ignored every warning, every sign, every voice telling me that shortcuts always have a cost. She paused, touching the small scar on her wrist where she had been burned in the fire, a permanent reminder. But I don't regret surviving. I don't regret breaking that covenant. And I don't regret learning this lesson while I still had time to learn it. Some women never escape. I did. A year later, Chidinma met someone new. Not a wealthy man, but a good man. A teacher who made her laugh and talked to her about books and dreams. She was cautious this time, careful, unwilling to rush into anything. But she was also open, in a way she had never been before, to the possibility of something real. Her mother noticed the change in her and smiled one evening as they prepared dinner together. "You're different now, Didi. Stronger. More at peace." Chidinma nodded, stirring the pot of soup. "I learned that some prices are too high, Mama. I learned that wealth without character is worthless. I learned that the things we chase can chase us back. And I learned that there's more than one way to live. Poverty is hard, yes, but there are things worse than being poor. I've seen them. I've survived them. And I never want to be that desperate again." Her story spread through the village, then through the region, told in whispers and warnings. The story of the woman who married for gold and discovered that some treasures carry curses, who destroyed a shrine that had consumed 6 women, who chose freedom over wealth and lived to tell the tale. It became one of those stories that mothers tell their daughters, a modern folktale about greed and consequences, about the dangers of valuing material things over moral things, about the terrible price that people sometimes pay for prosperity. And whenever young women in Enugu and Nui and beyond would talk about marrying rich men, about finding husbands with money and status, someone would inevitably mention Chidinma's name. "Remember her," they would say. "Remember the woman who had everything and it nearly cost her life. Remember that some doors, once opened, could destroy you from the inside out. Remember that the fastest path to wealth is often the most dangerous. Remember." Chidinma herself became a sort of counselor for women in her community, the one they came to when they were considering marriages they weren't sure about, when they needed someone who understood the temptation of security and the courage it takes to choose otherwise. She never preached or judged. She simply told her story, showed her scars, and let them draw their own conclusions. 3 years after the night she destroyed the shrine, Chidinma married the teacher. It was a small wedding, nothing like the lavish ceremony she'd had with Chief Okafor. But it was filled with genuine love, real laughter, and people who cared about her for who she was, not what she represented. As she stood in her simple dress, exchanging vows with a man who had nothing to offer but his heart and his integrity, she thought about the girl she used to be, the one who calculated the worth of every relationship based on material gain. That girl had died in a fire in a mansion in Enugu, consumed not by flames, but by the consequences of her own choices. The woman who stood in her place was scarred but free, poor but rich in wisdom, understanding finally that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or inherited or stolen. They have to be chosen, nurtured, and protected. Like love, like integrity, like the courage to walk away from gold when that gold carries a curse. So let me ask you something. If you were in Chidinma's position, knowing what you know now, what would you have done? Would you have married Chief Okafor in the first place? Would you have stayed in poverty, watching your mother suffer, knowing you could change everything with one choice? Or would you have made the same decision Chidinma made, valuing security over safety, wealth over wisdom? And here's a harder question. Do you think she was right to destroy the shrine, knowing it would cost her husband's life? Was it self-defense? Was it murder? Was it justice for the 5 women who died before her? How do you weigh one life against many? How do you judge a woman who is also a victim, who made choices based on everything she had been taught about survival and success? Think about the women in your own life. Your mothers, daughters, sisters, friends. How many of them have been taught that marrying well is more important than marrying for love? How many have been told that poverty is a failure, that wealth is success, that security from a man is better than security built by your own hands? Chidinma's story is extreme, yes. Most wealthy men are not maintaining shrines that consume their wives' life force. But the pressure she felt, the choices she made, the values she learned, those are real. Those exist in every community, every culture, every place where women are taught to see themselves as investments rather than individuals. This story, like all the best folktales, carries a truth deeper than the specific details. It asks us to examine what we value, what we're willing to sacrifice for comfort, and what we're willing to risk for freedom. If you found this story powerful, if it made you think or feel something deep, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from, and whether you've ever faced a choice between security and freedom, between what you wanted and what was wise. And if you think this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear what happened in our next folktale, the story of the man who bought his success with promises he couldn't keep, and the night when all his debts came due at once. Subscribe now so you never miss these stories that will touch your heart and keep you thinking long after the video ends. Because some stories are entertainment, but some stories are warnings. Some stories are both. And the wisest among us know how to tell the difference. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, choose your path carefully, because sometimes the road to everything you ever wanted leads straight through everything you should have feared.